I am Glenda, the Good Witch of Accessibility. I've been introducing myself as the Good Witch since I was a little girl. I am a huge Wicked fan. And so just so you know, I do identify with Elphaba in the Wicked series of things, all right? And if you see my husband pick me up in the afternoon, you'll notice that he even gave me a G-Witch license plates on my car. I can't go anywhere stealth. So after lunch, it's a good topic. Don't make me read, writing in plain language. Let's dive in. Oh, I'm Chief Information Accessibility Officer at DeQ, and I've been doing this digital accessibility thing since the 90s. If you want to hear more, buy me whiskey. I entitled this talk, Don't Make Me Read, because somebody wanted to name their book that, and they were denied permission. And so at the end of this talk, I'll be showing you a book by Jenny Reddish, which is Letting Go of the Words. And they wouldn't let her call it Don't Make Me Read. So I'm like, well, I can name my presentation that. What I really mean is don't make me read anything extra. Don't make me use more brain cells than I need to use. So when we're creating our effective digital content, what makes it effective? How is it useful? It really depends on not how good you think it is when you create it, but how well is it serving your audience? Can they find what they need? Do they understand it? And can they use the information to take action? That's what defines effective digital content. So we're at an accessibility conference, and this will tie back into accessibility, but the great thing is it helps everyone. How are you going to write effective digital content? When I was in college and high school, the web wasn't a much of a thing, y'all. So when they were teaching me to write effectively, it wasn't for a digital platform. And how we write for digital versus a novel are completely different. So effective digital content is written for that audience, only what they need, and in their own words, not your words, their words. So I'm going to show you something and ask you, which would you rather use? And dang it, did Lucy leave already? Where's the heckler? Imagine you needed a passport. I'm going to pull up on screen a passport screen version 1, and let me refer to my notes. This is a real image of the passport page from 2007. I used the Wayback Machine to get to it. It has 358 words in this piece that I'm showing. That's excluding the link text. It has 5 links, and even though it appears to have some bold headings, semantically, I looked at the HTML, they are not headings, they're just bold text, so 0 headings. So this is Passport version 1 from 2007. And now I'm going to show you Passport's version 2, which I would have taken just the other day. I didn't write the date down. But in this, if you can't see the screen, we have 4 rectangles. There are 14 words on the screen that aren't links, 14 words. There are 19 links, and there are 4 structural headings, and there's some cute images. I didn't check the alt text. They don't look like they convey a lot of meaning. So Let me ask, raise of hands, who likes version 1 from 2007? Anyone want to use that one? Okay, anybody like version 2 better? All right, what's the difference? Structure, glance, very easy to glance and read. When you consume a website, are you reading every word? And paragraphs of text, I think that it was said earlier today, paragraphs of text make our eyes get kind of sleepy. I don't want to read that. I'm on that screen. So structure, reduction of text. In the first example, if you were to read all those words, somebody was writing to themselves what they knew in their own language, as opposed to the second one, which has things like get or replace a passport, which was probably exactly what the person or you would have in your mind. It matches your words. So this example was first shown to me by the great Whitney Quisenberry, who is good friends with Jenny Reddish, and they originated a lot of this plain language material. So the difference, as we've discussed, is plain language, making it very easy to read, font size, the structure, and logical design. When I first heard Whitney talk about plain language, I didn't quite know what she meant, and I misinterpreted it. I thought that plain language was dumbing it down. And Whitney's like, no, 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 not at all. Plain language is in the active voice, it's short sentences, personal pronouns, concrete familiar words, no extra words, no jargon. Sometimes we have to put the jargon in because it's a requirement for what we're writing about, but try and pull out any jargon that's unnecessary. That's what plain language is. What I had confused it with is easy read, which I'll show you in just a moment. But the beauty of plain language is that who's it going to help? Anyone that's impatient, short attention span or split, multitasking, information overload, low literacy. Maybe English isn't their first language or whatever language the page is written in. Slow readers, careful and thorough readers, which at this point, when I was first learning about this, I didn't realize that people that are older tend to read slower and be much more cautious about clicking. So you're increasing the usability for that whole group. Oh, and people with cognitive disabilities. The thing I misunderstood when I first was exposed to this is you're dumbing it down. You're making it too simple. I'm not a kindergartner. And I was working at the University of Texas at the time, right? Sorry. And then Whitney showed me this example of easy read. Easy read is really taking it down. Plain language is not for easy read. Easy read is a specific format, and I should say for specific cognitive disabilities. Not all cognitive disabilities, it's for specific cognitive disabilities that can't read at a reading level higher than grade 1 or 2 or 3. That's not what plain language is. I want you to be excited about plain language, and I want you to think of it as a game. Plain language is pure. It's way more powerful. And it's so much more usable for everybody. What's really fascinating on the research that's been done on plain language is the specific usability needs of teenagers. Some teenagers are more impatient and they may have a shorter attention span. Let's think about the usability needs of someone that's low literacy for whatever reason or not their first language. They're going to be a slower reader. They are going to focus more on central content and they don't want all the extra. And then, as I mentioned, older adults tend to read slower. Older always means older than us, right? Careful and thorough readers and cautious clickers. So helping these people led to a breakthrough. And this is a quote from Clayton Lewis given to the US Access Board. Cognitive disabilities amplify normal barriers. So something that you and I will tolerate on a site is actually causing a barrier for somebody with a significant cognitive disability. And this amplification is a great opportunity to inspire us to make it better for everyone. Disability is that extreme point. And so this is fun. And I never would have thought before this research was done that the teenagers and the older folk and the low literacy I think of them as such a different, and they're very different. But one of the things found in this study that was done by Whitney and presented at Access U is the teens, what did they want? Simple, use words in their vocabulary. Guess what the older adults want? Use words that they know, especially for technology. They may not understand your highfalutin hamburger word. And low literacy put that most important information first. The teens want concise, get to the point. The older adults need that too. So does the low literacy. Simple, short sentences. So I'm not saying blend them all together, but what we're seeing is that sometimes the plain language is literally helping way more than you would expect. So similar guidelines for different reasons. This one surprised me. My vision has deteriorated. I'm older. I had cataracts in both eyes. I paid the big dollars to get the lenses that could have let me read and see 20/20 distance and close. Then I had to sign the big disclaimer that said it might not work. The distance worked, the close didn't. So my vision is kind of trashy at the read level, kind of trashy. So I really appreciate big fonts. And I know I expect people that are older to want a bigger font. I didn't expect the kids. But the kids, when Whitney did this research, they like a larger font, at least 10 point. Okay, so the older adults did want the 12 and the low literacy actually wanted 12 or 14, but the kids actually didn't want itty bitty fonts either. The kids were unamused by pictures that didn't have meaning. They didn't want your decorative extra goop. The older adults wanted to know what it was there for, those images. And low literacy actually want the information and graphics because it's dual mode, right? We know that from learning. So as you think about your audience, pay attention to their needs. And let's take a moment and look at another example. And let's think about the design of this. Which of these do you think is easier to read? Yes, this is a prescription bottle, and I'm calling it prescription 1. It does not look like something I get today at my pharmacy as much. There's an RX number and a date at the top. It looks like it's from the 2000s, y'all. And it says Monopril, which is in all uppercase. But let me ask, there is a pharmacy name and instructions. What's the first thing you see somebody yell out? What's the first thing that draws your eye? Which one? Okay. Abacus. Yeah. There's big blue words on here that says abacus, and those are the biggest. And so I guess that's Abacus Pharmacy. Okay. Well, let me show you prescription 2. Prescription 2 happens to be from Target Pharmacy, which I had to look all the way down to the bottom of the bottle. And up at the top, the very first thing it says is the person's name. And the very next thing it says is the prescription type, amoxicillin 500 milligrams, and it's big. It's big and it's highlighted. It's so big and highlighted, it's the first thing that drew my eye. If I were to tell you, what did you read first, and answer that question, I would read amoxicillin 500 milligrams, and then my eye goes up and I see the person's name, then the instructions, and then the other goop, like quantity, refills, doctor, date, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to show these side by side. And I want you to think about plain language and structure and reduction of words. Which one does it better? Target had somebody thinking about who? The user. What was the user's need? It's the most important thing you need to know when you're reaching for a prescription bottle. Did I get the right med? What's the next most important thing? Is it mine? And those are so clear. There's white space. And the other one, it kind of in a way reminds me of that dense screen that was shown earlier. It makes me sleepy. I don't want to read it. I don't want to read it. So the instructions on the Target one are right below the name of the medicine, and they are in a slightly smaller font. In the first one, the Abacus one, I have to look, and it took me a while just now to find it, whereas on the Target one, I found it in 1 second. On the other one, I had to look at the top. I don't think it's there. I looked at the bottom. It wasn't there. It's stuck kind of in the middle. It doesn't stand out. Yeah. And what's fascinating is we have an all caps thing going on here, which I would beg to say Target should move. They have amoxicillin written in all caps. I wouldn't have written it in all caps, but they do have the instruction written in upper lowercase. The instruction on the old Abacus one is all uppercase. And there is a patient more detailed card underneath the Target one. So I love these examples. The Passport, a government website that went from a ton of words to simple. And this prescription, you can see information structure and plain language everywhere, not just on websites. So now let's take some time to dig into visual readability, not talking about plain language, but for those of us that are reading with our eyes, what makes it easier for us to read with our eyes? And let's make this a little interactive. Readability and line length. in the room, if you look at the screen, the first example has 140 characters wide on my slide. And the second one has 60 characters wide. Who prefers reading 140 characters wide? I see no hands. Who prefers reading 60 characters wide over 140? Okay. It is shown that y'all are amongst the majority when you made that decision. It's harder to read long lines of text and keep your eyes on the correct line. And then when you come down to get the next line, you can get on the wrong line. So be careful of overly wide text if you're looking for easier readability for a person that can see. What about justification? Left justified, right ragged is the example on the left. And on the second example, I have left and right justified. Who prefers the example on the left, left justified, right ragged? Okay, and who prefers nice edges on either side? Okay, I had the majority going for the left justified, right ragged. And I'm not telling you what to like. You can like whatever you like. But studies show, on average, there's easier readability with left justified, right ragged because the extra gaps between the words that occur in left and right justified make it harder for the average human to read the content. So it may look pretty from a distance, but what's the point? The point isn't, oh, it looks pretty and all lined up. The point is, can I read it easily? It takes more cognitive brain power to do the other one. This one's simple. Who likes mixed case? Anybody like all uppercase? Do you like being yelled at on the internet? The theory behind this, the research behind this shows that mixed case is easier to read. Why? We know our alphabet. We know it in uppercase and lowercase. Why? Because we actually read word shapes. And words are more unique when they're in upper lowercase. So it takes more brain power to read all uppercase. So here are some things that you can simply do to make your content easier for a person that can see to read. 65 characters or less per line. Justify that left margin, but no right margin. Don't center your text and use mixed case, which is funny because that didn't totally match what I just showed. Oh, yeah. I must have missed the centered one. Don't center your text. I am wicked about centering my text. I think it looks so cute. I do it all the time. I do it to make a point. And I work with a colleague, Matthew Lucan, who comes from a design background, and he scolds me every time he catches it because it's not about looking cute. So in the CSUN presentation that I was working on earlier, when I centered text, I did feel a little guilty. So these are just some simple things that you can do to make it more visually readable. What about font? Is there a perfect font out there? Are you supposed to use serif or sans serif? You know, the old rule is serifs were written for paper, or serifs were easier to read on paper because of a higher print quality back in the day, before the resolution of our monitors got so delightfully crisp. And sans serif was, without the extra little tails, designed for digital reading. So that's the old rule. What's the new rule? What are we supposed to do? Adobe did this fantastic research. I have it, links to it in my presentation. They looked at 16 different fonts. And one of you said it earlier, they're looking for glanceability. How easy is this to read at a glance? How is it to read for a short passage? An interlude is what they called it, or long form in a book. So they're looking at all three types of things. And then they did something really fascinating. What did the user prefer? What was their reading speed between the 16 different fonts? And what was their comprehension score when they were given questions? And it was fascinating. Y'all don't go running out, changing all your fonts to Garamond, okay? The top rated font, indeed, on average, was Garamond. But one size does not fit all humans. It doesn't. What's most important about the environments that we work in, especially web, is if you've used HTML text, the user can change that to the font that they want. That's what's most important. So I have the 16 fonts and the research here, as well as a link on the next screen so that you can dive in deeper. I think this is fascinating, but I want to reinforce this. No single font showed up as the best for all users. It really didn't. And this was fascinating. I actually participated in the research. People do not usually pick the font that they read the best with. You can't even ask us, because I think what's happening is we may be attracted to a font because it looks pretty. It matches our aesthetic. And it wasn't the font that I picked didn't match with the one that I read the fastest with and had the highest comprehension with. So this research is solid as a rock. And I think forever puts an end to there is no perfect font. We know there is no perfect font. If you are struggling with how to choose a good font, there is a lovely article, How to Choose a Font for Responsive Web Interfaces. It's a good read from Jake at Adobe. And you do have to take into consideration what language are you writing in. There is a suggestion for sans serif, so y'all can all feel safe. We can all feel safe with our sans serif fonts. And look at your legibility and the readability rules that I put prior to this. Font size, larger. We're not in Texas, but bigger is better, right? Larger font sizes do increase readability, especially reading speed. 12 to 14 point font for all audiences is a good thing to aim for. But in this day and age, we're working with devices, whether it's the web or our mobile phones or our iPads, where we can control the font. Make sure that you're meeting those WCAG standards for good reflow so that when I do increase the font, because I want it even larger than that it works. Few more things before we get into the actual language of plain language, and that is styles. Which do you prefer to read, italics or normal? Normal, okay. Italics is harder to read slightly. I am tempted to use it on occasion, but I try not to, and it's because it's changing the word shape that you and I know. It's tilted it, so more cognitive power to read the word, because we don't decode every letter. Underline versus not underlined. And this is a fun one to think about because a lot of people that are writers, we underline things back in the day to emphasize. But in the digital space, that means link. And it's also creating extra noise. And so it's just trashing up the page. Don't underline unless it's a link, and then it is reasonable. So you've got some extra guidance for making things visually easier to read. Sans serif is still popular, bigger font size. Don't underline unless it's a link, and don't use italic. Reader view mode in browsers, I want to cover for just a moment, allows you to focus on your main content, removing any distractions, the ads, the sidebars, the backgrounds, adjust your font size, contrast, and layout. In Firefox, there's a little icon. It's up in the URL address bar. It looks like a piece of paper with little lines on it. If you click on that, you can get the readability view or the reader view. And in Chrome, I have the instructions there too. And just as a sample, I remember the first time I used a readability tool, I literally sighed when I went from the overly busy page where I'm showing a CNN article, and the article is about lasers could take broadband where fiber optics can't, but there's a lot going on up in the header. I can't even read it with my vision. There's some other articles down on the left. And then I click in Firefox that little reader view, and that all goes away. And it picked my background of a light tan with a darker but not full black, and there's extra spacing, and the lines aren't as long, and it's just like, it's inviting me to read. It's inviting me to focus. And within that particular tool and others, you can personalize your other settings. Text size and how much space between different lines, and even spacing between lettering. This can help so much. So remember to let humans pick their fonts and be able to do these things. Don't, whenever you can avoid it, use text inside images. I think we've already heard about color contrast, so I won't spend too much time here, but do you really think it matters? Can you read me now? You know, I actually have "Can you read me now" at least 6 times on the screen, and it takes a while for it to be visual, especially for me. So we've heard earlier what the requirements are. There is a 4.5 to 1. Yes, I'm serious. I argued over breakfast tacos with Sean Lawton Henry, begging for her to move from 5.5 to 1 to 4.5 to 1. I did win the battle from text background to background color. And on large text, it's 3 to 1. I also helped write in WCAG 2.1 the requirements for non-text contrast, where we settled on 3 to 1. And so even though this is about readability, I had to sneak in a little bit of the text contrast requirements of 4.5 to 1. That's literally for text. And then in WCAG 2.1, we brought in for non-text, which would include if you had a printer icon, no words, but that's the button, you need to make that printer icon at least 3 to 1. And I'll pause for a moment because I'm that geek. Why didn't we make it 4.5 to 1? No one had to bribe me with a breakfast taco, but they had to explain to me that when we read text, we read at speed most of the time when longer form. And you need that distinction to pick up the difference between an I or an M or an N or an R and so that content that contrast really matters when we're reading large content. When we're looking at these icons, unless you're reading hieroglyphics, we're able to dwell a little bit more on that. And so I went and talked to the researchers that originally came up with the 4.5 to 1 and asked them why they went to 3 to 1. So you already know tools to look at this. I'm a big fan of TPGIs because it's cool. All right, looking at time, looks like I'm still plenty good. All right, because now we're going to get into the plain language piece. It was important to talk about those other pieces of the structure and the visual, but this next piece is so delightful because it's actually going to help screen reader users as well too. I don't know that the screen reader users are going to care what font you've used or how long your line of text is. They may care about your sentence structure going on and on and on and on. But this logical design for using a plain language is going to help. So let's look at the design and layout to increase comprehension. And on screen, I have put up a picture of something that's called DOTD issues winter weather travel advisory. I didn't count the words on the page, but there's a lot more than I showed you on the passport. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs. Oh, and it even looks left, right, justified, y'all. And I do not think it's in a large enough font, right? This is a wall of words. You want to avoid walls of words unless you're in long form in a book. This doesn't belong on your web page. So how are you going to break that down?
Hey, Glenda, before you move on, we've got a question over here.
You bet.
Sorry. First, I wanted to say, I think even when for Braille users, I asked one of my other colleagues and we both like the shorter lines of text.
Yes.
And we also like the lack of emphasis symbols needed. So like all caps would be better than it telling us it's bolded or italic.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because you can just, you're not wondering if that's a contraction or not. But the other question I was going to ask is for these color schemes and like the adjusting of fonts, do you recommend having a visible toolbar up on the site, or are you manipulating that through the menu system of the browser?
So I will tell you that my answer, and then I'm going to poll, and then I'm going to ask Rob what his answer would be, just to see how we compare. I already gave you fair warning. My answer would be, I don't want to add another tool for somebody to have to figure out. I literally want the font and the contrast to be meeting WCAG in the first place. And then for people to adjust, I would like to rely on the browser because I don't want to make people make settings per site. That's me. Rob, are you willing to play games with me?
Same.
Thank you. And that's not saying that it's wrong to have one of those. I'm not a fan of them. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Clutter, screen reader,
Yep. Yep. And I've had to argue with some of my clients. I'm sure some of y'all have had the same arguments where they refuse to do a good contrast in the first place. They were sticking too closely to their brand colors. And, you know, I'm just like, really, did you want humans to read this or not? Another question?
I just wanted, I'm a legally blind person, but I do have some vision. I use
zoom text at about a 3x magnification rate on a 24-inch monitor.
Mhm.
And right away, and I was surprised, but I guess that's because it might be a low vision thing. When you had the text examples up there that had, of course, the normal left margin, and then you had the right ragged, or you had the total
Yes.
justification across the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
I prefer the total justification because
Interesting.
depending on your field of view, or if you use magnification, it tells you exactly right where that line is going to stop. So you
Gotcha.
don't have to be going like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, it's over here further.
Uh-huh.
No, it ended a little sooner. So
Right.
having that straight, because that basically like makes a straight line, not a line down, but you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a
And so-
marker for you that you're at the end of the
Yes.
line. You don't have to keep
So
looking. Mhm.
For low vision, if you're talking about low vision, legally blind, but still partial vision
Yeah.
users, that could make a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. And if it's not that, because what I'm wondering is, I still think there's more cognitive load on the brain when you're having to parse a different distance between words. And so what it could be is a design element that has a line over there. It could be as simple as a border on the page so that you wouldn't need to do the right justification. I hear what you're saying, but I want a more elegant solution. Do you think that might meet your need?
Yeah, that might be a good compromise,
Mhm.
because you would still have something over there that told you, like, your brain wouldn't really have to
Yeah.
think about it. It's just
Yeah.
like, it's there, it's there.
Yeah.
It's that little fence over there.
And I really want to say how much I appreciate your comment, because I'm sharing research, but you know what's really important? What did Lucy say? Real people's experience. Real people's experience. And it's not going to be one size fits all. In a lot of the physical disability categories, there's a one size fits many, but I love the area that we're moving into in recent years, and I see us continuing to move into, which is personal preferences, because as we try to solve cognitive disabilities, we cannot solve with one size fits many. It's usually one size fits one, which means we have to have the preferences dials. But that's a conversation for chocolate and whiskey. But we have another question here.
Well, on the topic of fully justified text,
Mhm.
it is common practice for lawyers to write all of their legal opinions in fully justified text. So if you hate lawyers, there's a reason for hating fully.
I don't need to hate lawyers, but I can also inspire lawyers to consider if they want someone to read that easily and to recognize. And I actually do love at least 2 lawyers, 3 lawyers, Lainey Feingold, Eve Hill, and Dan Goldstein are 3 lawyers that I absolutely love in the field of disability rights. And I just don't know you well enough. I may adore you too. So plain language plus readability plus logical design is going to equal digital content that works. So let's get into how can we improve our language in our writing. I've shown you a lot of ways to improve the readability from a visual perspective. And that's important, but it's also important what words we're putting on the screen. Give people only what they need. If you've written it, when you go to edit it, cut again, cut a 3rd time, and cut a 4th time. I was in a presentation at AXCON last week, and it was fascinating. They gave us some examples of sentences, what they looked like for an instruction on a website. And then they said, go edit this into plain language. And it was so funny because I care about this. And I knew I was speaking about it this week. So I watched it on purpose. And I didn't make that last cut. I only did cut 1, cut 2, cut 3, and then they showed me the cut 4 answer that they'd come up with. I was like, yep, I needed to cut one more time. So it's one of the reasons Jenny Reddish ended up calling her book Letting Go of the Words. When we've written words down, we kind of have a hard time letting go of them. And we need to learn to do that because we really improve the quality. I have another quote for you in a little bit. It's important. Oh, we have a question over here while microphone is getting over there. Start with your key point. Don't bury your key point. Use that inverted pyramid of reporting. Yes.
So how do you feel about introductions and conclusions just for the sake of lack of abrupt writing?
I think I would usability test it with the audience and ask. And one of the things you could do on the introduction and the conclusion is make them scannable, skippable, so that I can have an easier choice to pick that out. I work with a fabulous writer editor at DeQ. He edits my stuff and he points out some of my abrupt, because I'll be real functional and I'm like, I got it. And now I'm moving on. And he's like, I need a transition. So I do think that there's a place for that.
Is there, like, if you were, you know how there's synonyms, so if I was trying to say that there was like luminance in a room instead of light, is there a recommended, like, under 12 characters is better than, you know, 8 letters or more, or something like, is there a guideline of like how easily the eye recognizes the word and the shape of the word?
It's a great question. When we're looking for plain and simple language, what I'm going to suggest is if you have a synonym that will work, that is shorter and doesn't detract from your meaning, the shorter one is generally going to be easier. It took a lot less cognitive power to read the word light than to read the word luminance. It took less power. It also took a lower vocabulary layer. One of the things when I speak on cognitive accessibility and cognitive friction and energy is I have 2 bachelor's degrees. Does that mean you should write everything that I read at a 16th grade level? Please don't make me think that hard when I'm just trying to figure out how to microwave my food. You know, don't write at that level when you don't have to. The other thing that I would say is, you know, if you're writing poetry or art and there's a reason to use that word, use that word. But what I'm talking about here is efficient communications in a digital space. And I'm not talking about art. Breaking down your wall of words, I want you, when you go back and look at your web pages, to start recognizing, oops, that's a wall of words. What can I do to break it down? And to layer your information. So this is how we can make it scannable. In a newspaper article, we see this all the time. The summary in the lead at the beginning of the story, I can read the first couple of sentences and get the main point. Do that in your writing too. You want to give some more detail? Okay, do that in the next section and the minor details towards the end. So start with those key points. Don't bury the lead. You've heard a lot about headings at this conference. We love our headings for good reason. Outlining your content with headings helps our readers find things, scan. It also helps us as writers keep to the point. Make your heading levels obvious with the visual size and use the visitors' words in the headings, speaking in their language. I am the listiest list girl on the planet. I'm working on lists in WCAG 3 right now. I love them. Easy to grab. They're short. I'll use numbers for when the order matters, but give me a bulleted list and a list within a list. Those even make me happy, keeping that structure in parallel. Lists are very, very useful, especially on our digital formats. Tables, you're going to find are also helpful for taking your content and breaking it into logical data tables. Keeping them simple, and don't center text in table. That's my worst. You can call me out on that on the frequent. Everybody knows to make their links meaningful out of context. That is a best practice. WCAG doesn't require the link to be completely meaningful out of context. It'll let you use the sentence around it, sad to say, but be better than that and make your link meaningful completely out of context. And use action verbs. It was surprising, some early link research showed that longer links are actually somewhat better instead of these cryptic short links. In other words, make it clear. So you can write in plain language, making it more readable and scannable by using the headings and the structure for lists and tables and good links. What I will say is, how do you practice this? How do you take this back to your office if you haven't been doing this before? And the two places I use the most are Hemingway app. Anybody use the Hemingway app? It's brilliant. I will say that it may not be as accessible as it should be. I think it does use color to convey information. And I have not tested it with a screen reader. So I apologize for that. But I have to say, for someone who can use the Hemingway app, that it will take your content, it will highlight, and it feels like a game to me, as it highlights my sentences in yellow that are difficult to read and highlights my sentences in red that are very difficult to read. And then as I change them in the editor, the colors go away. So it feels like a game to me to succeed. It also gives me reading level. The other tool that I'm using on the regular is any of your AIs. Just write what you need to write, and then explain to the AI who your audience is, what your format is, and say, can you write this in plain language? Now, don't take exactly what it got back and go, oh, this is it, this is perfect. You knew what you meant in the original. And so you then edit, but it's going to help you learn how to let go of the words. And as you're doing that, I want you to keep this wonderful quote in mind. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And we've got some questions over here in the corner. As microphones are making their way over there, I want to tell you, if you want to read more about this topic, plainlanguage.gov is a wonderful site. NIH has plain language. And then I promised you Letting Go of the Words by Jenny Reddish, who is best friends with Whitney Quisenberry, whose research I shared with you. And this is the book, Letting Go of the Words, that she wanted to title Don't Make Me Read. They wouldn't let her, because they just published Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think. And they were like, no, they're going to confuse the two titles. So you can't, you can't do that. So question over here.
Both a question and then a comment after that. For the Hemingway app,
Do you know if the information that you input into it is stored like a Chat GPT or any of the AI tools like that?
I don't
Okay.
know.
So
No.
then there's my follow-up comment. Be very, very cautious of the content you put into these, because if you're putting proprietary content, intellectual property content in there that maybe is going to be published or isn't yet published, it becomes open access to everyone. So just be cautious there. And if you have students using these, instructors will go through and see if they were cheating. So it could be something they ran through on their own, and then it pops up saying, oh, this existed out on the internet, even though it's their content. So just some cautions from those kind of spaces.
Appreciate those very much. And I want to brainstorm for just a moment. I believe that Microsoft has some similar tools inside theirs, and I bet that they're not as glommy on your intellectual property. And so that might be another place to look for it. There's an enterprise option for it. Okay. And I currently have access to Gemini, but in the Google Drive, but I'm like, it's not smart enough for me yet. It feels like a toddler. Was there another question? All right. Got another one. Okay. While microphone is making it over there, I did want to say one plug. Last week I mentioned I helped host a conference called AXCon, AXECON, free online 3-day conference, 4 tracks. Everything was recorded. So if you need to share information about accessibility with designers, developers, or want to hear Lainey Feingold talk about what the state of accessibility is in the world, and especially in this country, I encourage you to get access to free goods. Question over here.
It wasn't a question, it's a comment on how much I loved this presentation. And just as a sort of to amplify the message, I spent 10 years at a branding agency, working under a brilliant creative director who businesses paid a lot of money to. And he actually used that last quote that you said a couple of times. And he often threw other designers under the bus for constantly adding extra stuff. So I think it's very interesting how the accessibility best practices parallels expensive branding and design practices.
Yeah.
So anyways, very good talk.
I love that. And what that means is that's a firm that really cared both about doing a great job meeting the needs of the audience while also meeting the needs of the client. And there's a struggle there, and it's hard to resolve, but it's worth it. You can be proud. I think that's a really good comment. Her comment was she's being paid, they're being paid to create a strong brand. An excellent user experience enhances your brand. An experience that's built for the ego of the owner or the ego of the designer does not build brand. It doesn't. It appeases 1 or 2 people, and it's not good. So I hope you enjoy. Is it break time yet? I think we're at break. So thank you so much.